North Korea. You hear the name and you probably think of the headlines, the military parades. It almost seems like a caricature of a dictatorship, right? But behind all that is an incredible story of war, a totally unique ideology, and a family dynasty that did something almost unbelievable. They made themselves into gods. So today we're going to dig in and figure out exactly how they pulled that off.
Remember back in 2011 when Kim Jong Un died? The world was glued to these unbelievable scenes of just mass, hysterical grief on the streets of Pyongyang. And it was easy for us on the outside to say, oh, that's all staged. But the truth is, it's way more complicated than that. For so many North Koreans, this wasn't just their leader dying, it was their god. And that was the result of a long, deliberate, decades-long process.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How does a family of dictators achieve that kind of status? To really understand the nuclear-armed nation we see today, we have to unravel that mystery. And the story, believe it or not, doesn't start in some grand palace. It starts on the battlefields of an occupied Korea, with the man who started it all.
Okay, so let's get into the God King's origins. Before he was the great leader, the man on all the posters, Kim Il-sung was actually a pretty famous anti-Japanese guerrilla fighter. His entire reputation was forged in the fire of war and occupation. The whole story really kicks off with Japan's brutal annexation of Korea in 1910, which, as you can imagine, sparked a really fierce resistance. This is where a young Kim Il-sung makes his name. He rises through the ranks, and in 1937, his victory at the Battle of Pochambo becomes a cornerstone of his personal legend. So when World War II ends, Japan is defeated, and the Soviets are looking for a guy to run the northern half of Korea. Well, they see their man. Here's this charismatic, nationalist hero who they think they can control.
So with the Soviets backing him, Kim Il-sung's power is pretty much locked in. But Korea is split in two, and his ambition to unify the entire peninsula under his rule, well, that's what leads to the catastrophic Korean War, a conflict that would forge the new nation's entire identity in ideology and just total destruction.
For North Korea, the Korean War was a straight-up apocalypse. It's hard to even wrap your head around the devastation. The US-led UN forces unleashed this unbelievably ferocious bombing campaign. We're talking about entire cities just flattened. By some estimates, more bombs were dropped on North Korea than in the entire Pacific theater of World War II. Just let that sink in.
This unimaginable level of destruction, with something like 10% of the entire population killed, it became the foundational trauma of the North Korean state. It created this deep, visceral hatred of the United States that the regime has used as a weapon ever since. It was the justification for pretty much everything that followed. To make sure that kind of devastation could never, ever happen again, Kim Il-sung came up with a powerful state ideology. It's called Juche. Now, on paper, it's all about self-reliance, the idea that North Korea has to stand on its own 2 feet, totally independent. But in practice, it became the perfect excuse for total state control and sealing the country off from the rest of the world.
Now, to control everyone on the inside, the regime created one of its most powerful and, frankly, terrifying tools, songun. It's basically a rigid social caste system. Every single citizen was sorted into one of 3 groups: the core, the wavering, or the hostile. And it was all based on how loyal your family was perceived to be to the revolution.
The level of control here is just staggering. Your songbun status decided your entire life. I mean, where you could live, what job you could get, your access to food, to healthcare, even who you were allowed to marry. It was a cradle-to-grave system designed to do one thing: reward absolute, unquestioning loyalty and crush any hint of dissent before it could even start. When Kim Il-sung died in 1994, power passed to his son, Kim Jong Un, in the first communist dynastic succession. And this kicked off a whole new era, one that was really defined by famine, fear, and some seriously wild provocations. The new leader took over a country that was already on the brink of complete collapse. See, the collapse of the Soviet Union, North Korea's main lifeline, triggered a catastrophic famine they called the Arduous March. Now, you'd think this would be the moment to open up the country, to ask for help, but no. Kim Jong-il did the exact opposite. He doubled down, implementing a military-first policy, and poured what few resources the country had left into the army, all while hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, of his own people starved to death.
As the country basically became a cornered animal on the world stage, the regime started lashing out with these just bizarre and brutal acts. I mean, we are talking about kidnapping a famous South Korean actress and director to force them to make movies for a communist Hollywood. They tried to assassinate the South Korean president. They even bombed a civilian airliner, killing everyone on board. These were the desperate, violent acts of a regime that was trying to project strength while it was rotting from the inside.
After his father's death, the world's attention snapped to this new, mysterious figure, a young, Swiss-educated Kim Jong Un. Nobody really knew what to expect, and he turned out to be this strange, unsettling paradox, a mix of modern, almost Western style, and old-school totalitarian brutality.
It was a real whiplash. On one hand, you saw him at pop concerts with his wife, something a North Korean leader had never done before. He famously bonded with Dennis Rodman over basketball. But then, on the other hand, and this is a huge other hand, he consolidated power with a ruthlessness that was shocking. He had his own uncle executed. There were reports of officials being killed with anti-aircraft guns, and he hit the accelerator hard on the country's nuclear weapons program.
All of that ruthlessness, all that consolidation of power, it led directly to the nuclear paradox that we're stuck in today. North Korea is still the most isolated state in the world, but now it has a credible nuclear deterrent. That makes it a permanent and totally unpredictable player in global politics. So this is why this history is so crucial to understand. It all connects. The absolute trauma of the Korean War, that explains the deep-seated anti-Americanism. The Juche ideology, that's the justification for their extreme isolation. That songun system, that's how they crush any dissent at home. It all contextualizes their obsession with the military and nuclear weapons. At the end of the day, it's all about one thing, a survival tactic.
You know, the faces have changed. We've gone from the guerrilla fighter to the movie buff to the basketball fan. But the core logic of the regime, survival at any and all costs, that has not changed one bit. Which leaves us with the ultimate, unsettling question. Now that they're armed with nuclear weapons, is the world's most enduring dynasty about to enter its final and most dangerous chapter?